And
So good.
no, I won't ask dumb questions.
You know, like all of a sudden can't say anything.
Now that it's recorded.
Yeah.
I'm trying to channel my smarter
Oh,
self.
good. Okay. Will you be able to tell us how many people attended at the end?
Yes, I can see right now. In fact,
I don't. Nope, I don't want to know now.
I
I
can-
want it to be a future knowledge.
Welcome, everyone. I'm waiting just a minute here. Thrilled that you're here. I'm gonna start in just a minute, but welcome. And we still have people joining, so I'm just gonna wait this out a few minutes. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah. No, okay. You don't want me fidgeting. Nope. I'm start seeing me doing circles in my chair.
I will introduce Punching the time here. Didn't wait just a few more seconds. Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting in just a few seconds. This would be when I would sing to you all. You can be glad that I'm not.
Oh, are we? Are we glad that you're not?
All right, this is an excellent time to start. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura Dresser. You are at the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, Centering Disability Justice. This is our second day, the closing day of the 2023 conference. I'm thrilled you're here. As I said, I'm Laura Dresser. I'm a member of the conference planning committee, a white woman in her late 50s, how'd that happen, with blonde hair pulled back, round glasses, a black turtleneck, and a black and white scarf on. I'm in my office, which is a white office lit by fluorescent lights. I am thrilled to be introducing this panel and serving in this host role. You are here for Evolving Within Systems of Oppression, a case study of organizational change at Chrysalis, Inc. I want to cover some basics and some information first, and also a land acknowledgement, and then introduce the panel and turn it over to Dani and Megan. But we are providing live captioning and CART services, which are available. There will be a Q&A instructions on this. You should be using the captioning link if you need the captioning services. So if you've come in from the not captioning link, you'll go to that. But that'll be, those directions will be in the Q&A, and look for them there if you're looking for the captioning link. We do have live captioning for this event. I want to start with the land acknowledgement on behalf of the Planning Committee of the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. I ask that you join me in acknowledging that our University of Wisconsin-Madison campus here on the shores of Wonkshik Home Ikla, or Lake Mendota, resides within the sacred homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place they call Dejope or Ford Lakes. As the reach of the university extends to the far corners of our state, we also respectfully recognize the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations of Wisconsin. Whether you are watching this from the land of these 12 First Nations, or you are more distant today, we encourage you to learn about the history of the land that you are on. As social workers, we have a duty to look critically at the role of our profession and the role it has played in the attempted cultural genocide and destruction of Indigenous families, such as was the aim of the boarding schools in this state and across this continent. This conference is rooted in critical reflection on our work as social workers. Our goal is to bring clarity about the past, but also to challenge and inspire us all to move into action in our work in communities once the conference is over. We hope this conference provides space for critical reflection, humility, and openness, which will allow us all to reflect, to hear and tell truths, and to move toward action and transformation to support Indigenous rights, cultural equity, and racial equity. With acknowledgement and gratitude, we move forward today in our journey. Before I introduce our speakers, a few Zoom info items. To access this presentation, you are required to provide your name and email. This is how, on the breakout sessions, we get your information for the CEUs for this presentation. So you are set. Once you're in, you're set on CEUs. This will also show up once in the Q&A. I will dismiss all questions about this. Just look at that one CEU rule or go to our go to the conference website on CEUs. The Q&A today is really for questions for Megan and Dani, and I know that'll be inspiring enough. Your microphones and cameras will be muted, but the Q&A feature will allow you to be part of this conversation. I know Dani and Megan want to maximize the interaction and the responsiveness of what they're doing. We'll be working through, we've got a lot of people on this event, so we may not be able to get to all the questions, but we really do encourage the interaction and questions. And I think, let's see, so really focus the Q&A on the content of this presentation. Any questions about logistics or other things, look for the 3 tips in Q&A about the live captioning, about the CEUs, about the next event, but then otherwise just use it for that and go to the website if you need other things, if that makes sense. And now I get to the reason you all are here, and thank you for being here. As I said, I'm thrilled you're here. I want to introduce Megan Malone and Dani Rischall, who are the panel today to talk about the work of organizational change and the work of decolonizing the project going on at Chrysalis, Inc. I'll introduce Megan first. She's currently a learning specialist at the School of Medicine and Public Health and in her final year of the part-time MSW program with an emphasis on BIPOC mental health. Megan's academic and professional career is vast and diverse, with a background in international conflict and dispute resolution and education focused on equitable academics in Division I athletics. Megan is serving her first of a 3-year term on the board of directors at Chrysalis, Inc. Welcome, Megan. I had the honor of having Megan in a class with me, so thrilled to see her. Dani Rischall is a licensed clinical social worker who has worked in the field of community mental health for over 15 years. For the past 11 years, Dani has been in the role of executive director at Chrysalis, Inc. Dani is a strong advocate for supporting mental health recovery and systems change. Chrysalis, Inc. is a nonprofit organization in Dane County that promotes mental health and substance use recovery by supporting work opportunities that encourage hope, healing, and wellness. Chrysalis has been supporting the community for over 40 years with a focus on centering the voices of people with lived experience and dismantling systems of oppression. In her role as executive director, Dani participates in numerous coalitions and work groups to strengthen communities of care from a lens of equity and inclusion. I've had the honor of having students placed with Dani, and so I've gotten to work with and know the work of both Dani and Megan, and I'm just thrilled that they're going to share their experience. I hand it over to them now, and I hope you engage through the Q&A.
Thank you, Laura. We really appreciate it. Just briefly about me, my name again is Megan Malone, she, her pronouns. I am wearing a Not Today Colonizer t-shirt designed by Lady Bear Designs. If you're interested, they are on Instagram. I have black curly hair, usually up in a bun, but today it is out and wild. I am wearing earrings also by a native designer located in Canada. And that kind of sums me up in that regard.
Good. I'm Dani Rischall. I am a white woman, late 30s. I have short brown hair and glasses, and I am wearing a shirt that I recently got from the YWCA Racial Justice Summit here in Madison that has the words humanity, community, growth, and restoration on top. And then I also have a white zip up hoodie.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and get our slides set up. We go. Hopefully everyone is able, that works well there.
Looks good on my end.
Perfect. So we will go ahead and just jump right in with a few pieces for ourselves that we wanted to just address up front in our goals for this presentation. And actually, I think our shared values of both being community members, working within the community, and looking for change. The language that we are picking is really intentional to use. Some of you, this might resonate, like this is what decolonization looks like, or this is how we fight the patriarchy, white supremacy. Our words are meant for you all to feel things and question things, and would, love for you to be on that journey with us in what this presentation looks like. From an accessibility standpoint, something that we're always striving for, we also want to acknowledge that there are limitations both in our organization that we are looking to upend and move around. So I think this presentation also serves as that too, being like, yes, there are holes in what we're doing and we're trying to fix those and also promote wellness at the same time. And then the big piece for us is this is one way that we're trying to figure this out. But also if you like some of this stuff or have questions about it, take it, share it. We often hear once people find out more about Chrysalis that they wish it existed in other states. Make it happen. Let us help you make it happen. And we want to push that too. This type of organization should be everywhere. And that's kind of a big push for us too in being here and being on this panel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. The only thing I want to add to is kind of to go off what we share is, we're doing this, we're recognizing like we're in community with each other in this conversation and also with you, and you'll see our information at the end, but we're continuing to grow and we want to, I think the best way that we found to do that is alongside others who are trying to push themselves in their organization. So if there's something that we could ever like partner on or explore together, that's a hope that we have.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to the next slide, we're really intentional about wanting to root some of this in academics, in philosophy, but also want to acknowledge that lived experience is just as important. We just also wanted a framework to kind of move us through how we are working within systems of oppression, which is the baseline of what Chrysalis is trying to do. Chrysalis is trying to actively dismantle things like capitalism, colonialism, and make the world more accessible for people, especially in the employment world and sustaining jobs. So there's a picture of a book called The New Structural Social Work, which is written by Bob Mullally and Marilyn Dupree. And they break down the different types of oppression, and and social work is rooted in structural oppression and how to dismantle that. And so our presentation and how we orient Chrysalis, we broke down to relate to these types of oppression. And so this presentation will correlate our actions with dismantling these types of oppression. So I will briefly go through these different types, but also iterate them as we move from one slide to the next. So there are, I should say, Mullally and Dupree broke down oppression into 5 different types. There's pervasiveness, which is social inequality, and that it's the belief that oppression is woven throughout social institutions as well as being embedded within individual consciousness. The next one is restrictiveness, which is where oppression represents structural and material limitations that significantly shape individual opportunities in one sense of possibility. The next one is hierarchical oppression, which is this type of oppression denotes a hierarchical relationship in which members of privileged groups have unearned advantages at the expense of disadvantaged groups. Then there's complex oppression. Power and privilege are relative because individuals hold multiple complex and intersectional social group memberships that can give relative privilege and disadvantage in different ways, depending on the different types of context. And finally, there's internalization. So oppression, this type of oppression also resides in the human psyche where oppressive beliefs are internalized. A couple other pieces that stuck out to me in this textbook was the process of working through oppression and dismantling it is the immediate relief or tension reduction on one level, accompanied by long-term institutional and structural change, which we both believe is like the foundation of Chrysalis, where we are trying to handle things acutely and in the moment, but push for sustainable change also. It's also about putting accountability and restructuring back in the hands of the public rather than small groups of elite, wealthy, and majority white. So understanding that like capitalism really is a top-down system, and that needs to change, but that also means reframing and frankly, I think getting rid of notions of capitalism, which is something we'll talk about further in the slides of how we try to hold ourselves accountable in that and also understand in some ways we're kind of stuck in the system. A big piece for me is remembering that oppression occurs and exists because it benefits the dominant group, which is also why organizing and community change is so important, because it's giving us back the power. And I think there's a different type of sharing when we create it from the bottom as opposed to top down. And then finally, individual problems cannot be understood separately from a social context. So we must create counter systems that are free from victim blaming, free market glorification, and welfare dependency. So again, there's going to be some disclaimers throughout this presentation of like, we are trying to hold our community accountable and change systems. We also are an organization that is trying to that needs to make money so that people can live. So that's probably the biggest type of contradiction that I think exists for us in this realm. So this next piece is kind of this next slide breaks down Chrysalis in a nutshell. Chrysalis is more nuanced, as you'll see, but what I'm about to share is what Chrysalis does currently. One of the main pieces of why Chrysalis exists is that they have a supported employment individual placement and support, IPS, which is vocational skills exploration for people, job search process support, initial on-the-job training, and ongoing support. So recognizing that people who are working through their mental health and mental illnesses and also on a road to recovery often need extra support just to get their feet back under them and and keep going, and also understanding the hills and the mountains of this journey, right? So very intentional with this type of jobs and employment search. The next piece that Chrysalis has created is vocational peer support, which is about mutuality and like that shared experience. And then persons with mental illness and substance use challenges have the opportunity to use their recovery experience with skills training to support peer achievement vocational goals. Next is Chrysalis Pops, which is probably what kind of keeps Chrysalis on the maps because they're so delicious, but it's work opportunities that improve the mental health and wellness of individuals and the community through producing and selling local organic frozen fruit pops. So again, local, bringing in other aspects of the community, but also creating job force for the people that we're working with. And then a fun piece, being able to eat and share food, break bread, create community, really important. And then another big piece for Chrysalis Pops is about visibility and stigma reduction. And finally, Chrysalis also has a clubhouse, which the goal is a space where people with mental health challenges come to build relationships, work employment, and educational goals, and support their individual recovery process.
Yeah, I'm going to share a little bit about the mission, vision, and then we have some of our belief and resolve statements. So I know Laura shared the mission in the introduction, and I wanted to share the vision as well as kind of where this came from, because it's a relatively new tool that we have at Chrysalis. I think it was just created within the last 2 years. I think it's been really important the last couple of years as we're kind of working through the pandemic and a lot of uncertainty around racial justice movements and kind of the growth of the organization. And we talked about in the last slide, or Megan mentioned how, especially when you're an organization that, you know, is working within these systems of oppression and wants to make changes, those things can take time, and knowing when the right time to address these things can be tough. So I think having the vision statement has been really helpful to have kind of like a guiding star that's out there while we can continue to make smaller changes or just acknowledge where we are in that process. So I'll just read that so we can all kind of bring that into the space. But Chrysalis envisions a community where everyone belongs, a community that is free from stigma, rooted in racial and social justice. This community is one where wellness and recovery are possible. Work, education, and purpose are recognized as integral to recovery. Everyone has access to peer support and holistic, equitable mental health and substance use services, and diverse lived experiences and strengths are celebrated. And then again, we have below our belief statement and a resolve statement. And this speaks to like how we want to do the work. So if we're going to really be like intentional about what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we're talking about it, I think we have to be grounded in these things together. And these were co-created with our staff and our advisory committee, which we'll talk about in our board as well. So here we say, we believe that work is recovery. Recovery is a process. We believe in person-centered services. Everyone deserves dignity. People are constantly growing and evolving. Everyone is a learner. Everyone is a teacher. Systemic oppression of marginalized communities is real, and it is our responsibility to create a more inclusive environment. We resolve to actively listen, lift each other up, reduce stigma, promote trust in the workplace, embrace conflict and grow from it, have a staff that is representative of our community, take action to support social justice in our work, and bring joy and celebration into this work. And something I like about these is it kind of speaks to the work, but also us as humans. Like, we are people working in these systems, and we need to kind of continue to grow internally so that we can also support the work we're doing in the community.
So just a brief reminder of what hierarchical oppression is. It's the type of oppression that denotes a hierarchical relationship in which members of privileged groups have unearned advantages at the expense of disadvantaged groups. And so for us, the picture that you see on the left is the Chrysalis organizational tree. And there's a lot of intentionality in what that looks like. As we go through it, we'll talk about each one of those pieces and why we have created it in such a way.
Yeah, and this will be kind of the flow. I think we're going to talk about breaking down some of those, like a little bit more academic ideas of what oppression looks like, and naming like the importance of realizing those are out there, and like what, Chrysalis, one organization, I know there are many doing important work kind of to address those things. And this is what Chrysalis is doing now, and what we hope to continue to do. But yes, so the tree was a really nice kind of visual image for us. We tend to, we really like kind of having, there's a lot of different learners. I personally love like images, and I love for people who know Canva, it's a design format on the web that it's free and accessible. So we try to use a lot of images to express like what we are trying to do in our community. But like Megan said, making sure that the people that we support are at the top. And then you'll also see there are a lot of different ways that we speak to like who we're supporting in the community. You see participants, consumers, peers, clubhouse members, clients, Chrysalis Pops participants. That's been a lot of conversation we've had at the organization, recognizing that, yes, sometimes it's nice when you have one word that everyone uses and you can be streamlined and branded in that. And then also like people have different ways that they want to identify themselves or be identified by others. And it's okay that it's not one word. So that's just, I think, one way that we kind of look at systems and how they kind of put you in one path, but you can have creativity there. And then even above the participants, we have this arch of internal committees we have at Chrysalis. So you see the social butterfly committee, our consumer advisory committee that we've actually changed. It's called a Chrysalis advisory committee now, and our change team. And those are committees that are made up of staff and folks that we support to, again, try to lift up voices of those most connected to the services, both providing and receiving, focused around some workplace wellness efforts and our social racial justice efforts and programming at Chrysalis. Let's see, I do want to just name, like, we have an organizational leadership team at the bottom, and you'll see that we call ourselves Roots. So, you know, it speaks to kind of that like tree image, but also the idea that, like, yes, there's different roles we all play, but we can move beyond a hierarchy and recognize that we all support each other, and the organizational leadership, which is typically, I'd say, in like a hierarchy space, you know, at the top, we're actually there to kind of support the soil, the growth of the actual services and the people in the community. And you'll see the board of directors is down there too. And I know Megan comes from that lens, and that's a really important place to be as well.
And I think I would just add in the imagery, the top is flourishing as much as the bottom is. So in the fact that a tree is a top down, it's also as much as a bottom up, and just, we need to water it. We need it to grow from there. But also we've really challenged what is the role of the board of directors. Are we making policy changes, or how do we make policy changes? What does voting look like? But then also we try to give time to how does that impact who is at the table, what is being shared. Transparency, I think, is a huge thing for us, both as individual board members, but then also with the community. So I'll just share some of the things that we've just recently talked about. We just had our board meeting last night. And so kind of two things that I think about is, one, since I've been on, I feel as if Dani's been asking for more board visibility. And I think a lot of board of directors get used to just making a vote, but not really being seen. You know, I've looked at other websites where you don't have their contact information, don't even necessarily have a picture. And so how do we change that, and how do we hold ourselves accountable to that? One is giving a description of who each person is, what their jobs are, where are they involved within the community. But also one idea that actually came up from my class last semester with Laura was to create a board of directors series where I will help support our board members creating whether it's a blog post, whether it's a picture series or a video resource of talking about who they are and why Chrysalis matters. It's really important that the Chrysalis community sees us, knows that we're real people and we're not just making votes for the sake of the power, right? And that we want them to be able to see who we are and reach out to us in that regard. And I think we'll get back to this next example that I'm about to share throughout this, but one piece that we've spent some time talking about is how to vote. How do we vote board members in? What are we voting for? And how do we hold ourselves accountable to not just being stuck in the system? So yesterday, we were working on potentially voting in a new board member and the importance of disrupting some of that, where it's like, so you just introduce them and we vote yes or no, or what type of demographics are we trying to get on our committee, or how do we hold spots for diversity? So that's just a kind of baseline of some of the types of conversations we're having. And also understanding that it's personal and we can feel things and we should feel things in that, but also, again, the health of the organization too. So there's the health of the board of directors as a team, but then there are those pieces as we move up the tree to keep healthy too in that regard. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that speaks to like that last bullet of the artificial barriers sometimes. I mean, sometimes they're not artificial. They're actually, a lot of times they're there just to actually keep things the same, and people who are in power, keeping them in power. But I think what we're trying to do as an organization at the board is really look at those. I mean, something we've talked about is, do we need to use Robert's rules of order? Because those, I mean, for me, I do not understand them. I think they're really exclusive in a lot of ways. So, and we're lucky we have an attorney on the board who's really great at like reading bylaws and really picking out what's needed. So I think that happens in a lot of spaces.
Yes. And also, what rules do we have to follow? Yeah. So like if the IRS says that we need to do something, we probably need to do it. But then how can we work around it to still honor that and not, frankly, break the law, but also, again, push our organization to the next level to, again, work through these systems of power that are in place.
And being transparent about it, I want to jump back to the bullet point before the policies that we're talking about lived experience and pay equity. So we're a staff at Chrysalis, primarily people with lived experience and people of all different experiences. So, academic experience, lived experience, we try to bring as much diversity and experience as possible. But something we've named as a value is that we do value that, the diversity and the lived experience, and pay equity is a big piece of that. So, and it's still a tough conversation though, because when you have people who are going to school and, paying for degrees, and people, Medicaid compensates people differently. So I think we understand we work within systems that kind of like there's reason why things have been a certain way, and we can push that to a degree. And some of those are artificial, some of them are not, but we need to be having those conversations to make sure that we're doing things with as much equity as possible.
Yeah. So this next slide starts off, we're going to describe how pervasive oppression, how it works. And so just again, as a reminder, pervasive oppression is social inequality is woven throughout social institutions, as well as being embedded within individual consciousness. So really kind of holding ourselves accountable for where our beliefs come from. And again, what the status quo, and how do you upend that, or why does the status quo exist? Usually the status quo exists to hold up power. And so I think what Dani and I are about to get into a little bit more is holding Chrysalis accountable for that. And again, name of the game, transparency and accountability. We're going to keep saying it, and y'all might just look at us and go cross-eyed a little bit, but really it's like, this is how we're trying to do that. Because even thinking about yesterday, our board voting, and I spent some time being like, where did I feel that physically? Where did I feel that in my body? And thinking about how systems have gotten to a point where they are embedded in our body and impacting that in that regard. So just wanted to throw that out there in that regard.
Yeah, I think that the idea of that transparency and the intentional language is so big. I think I also go back to the idea of like co-creating as much as possible. And, it is, it's been interesting as we've been moving toward like in this journey to focus more on co-creation and shared understanding, and also recognizing there are values in having roles and like where the boundaries are to like how many people you're bringing in and how much you're getting done, or maybe even checking some of the things of like, is the goal to get something done or be productive in this way, or is just holding the space to like hear voices, what we actually need to be doing at this time. And I think with this document, it's been really helpful. This is our Chrysalis identity statement. And this was a chance to kind of get everyone grounded. I mean, we, I think like many nonprofits, people wear a lot of hats, are in a community doing a lot of different things. And if we don't all feel like we have an understanding of what we're doing it, why we're doing it, kind of how we're doing it, it can feel really fragmented. So this document here kind of puts it all in one place. It has our mission statement, which is again what we spoke to earlier, as a really succinct, like what we seek to do, which is support recovery through meaningful work, purpose, and connection. Clarity on who we're serving. I think sometimes there's this hope that we can serve as many people as possible. And we also have to recognize we have a mission and we have parameters in that. You'll see our values are listed really clearly here. And we're actually hoping, we're kind of in the process now of operationalizing that, because I think that's taking it to the next step about being clear about what those actually mean. And then, like we've talked about, like we are pushing for social change, and we're also a business that employs people, and we need to be sustainable. So how can we hold both, and how can we continue to move forward with that?
And I think I would just add in this piece too, that difficult conversations are super important in any organization, but especially when we are in the community and trying to make such active change. Being called into a conversation is really good. And also just acknowledging how it feels is really important. But also understanding that being called into owning some of our stigmas is actually not supposed to be an insult. It's not supposed to be a judgment on who we are. It's, I want to bring you into this conversation because we can grow in this. We can move through this and understand what we've chosen to believe, also what has just been ingrained in us, and we didn't realize we were stuck in it. So that's what I also think about with pervasiveness and identity, both as a community member and also from a culture of our nonprofit. So, you know, and I think that's also partly my conflict resolution background. If you can't work through, if we go around conflict and don't go through it, it makes things worse. So, you know, really digging in and also understanding that it's a evolving conversation, and you know, sometimes there are steps forward, but the step backwards doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that we're just trying to upend so much rooted oppression in that regard. So just wanted to add that piece. So this next piece about Chrysalis, again, it's pervasiveness continued. And so this is another angle at which Chrysalis is trying to hold itself accountable.
Yeah, so this is our strategic planning themes that we worked on in 2021. And I think there's some different thoughts on the idea of strategic planning within nonprofits. A lot of times you hear that, you know, you put all this effort into it and then it's like a binder or documents that you put up on a shelf and you never look at again. And it was really important for me and our organization and the board to make sure that wasn't the case. So we actually, you know, came out with these pillars. So you'll see programming, organizational, community building, advocacy, diversity, equity, and inclusion as focus areas. We have listed strengths and challenges and opportunities. And we try to really, you know, come back to this as much as possible. And I think something as we're talking about, you know, change and wanting people to dream and hope, we also recognize that, you know, that there's actions we can take and there's actions that we don't have the capacity to take. So you hear, you know, you see a bullet about like acknowledging limitations or keeping hope in action. So that kind of comes up sometimes. You know, we work within Medicaid. And we all know that there are huge improvements that could be made to having healthcare access for all. But we do kind of want to continue to provide services while we recognize these systems have huge flaws. Laura, I see you popped in. Did you want something to say?
Yeah. I keep trying to find a good place.
Yeah, no worries.
Perfect.
To bring some questions, because one of the questions feels like it's really important to get answered right away. Somebody asking in your statement, competitive IPS opportunities. And I thought it does feel really important that you explain what IPS, since it's so central to the work that you do. So I'd invite you to answer that, just what IPS stands for and describe that a little bit. And then you also, there's a question about whether you're affiliated with Tubman Chrysalis in Minneapolis. And I thought I'd let you answer that. There's also a perspective of the presentation, US perspective or across the world. And if you wanted to engage with that now or save that for later, that makes sense to me. But I thought those two might be good to just jump in with. Forgive me, I'll go back away.
Thank you, Laura, I appreciate it. The first two, so first, I will say we are not connected to another Chrysalis. There are quite a few. It tends to be a really popular name for nonprofits, just like that transformative space of a Chrysalis. There are others that focus on employment and peer support, though, so that is interesting sometimes to get confused. And then locally in there's also a hairdresser too. So we get a lot of people coming in for their haircut, but no, we are not connected to any of them. And then for IPS, that's a good question, because that actually comes up, especially the focus on competitive employment as we are working to dismantle or kind of within the capitalist society, like systems, and addressing the flaws with that. But IPS stands for Individual Placement and Support, and it's an evidence-based model that was created at Dartmouth University. And it has, it's specifically for people with significant serious persistent mental illness, mental health, and substance use, and is looking at supporting people with their mental health recovery through work, recognizing that historically and currently that's a population that hasn't really had always had the opportunities to work in the community, and focusing on competitive work. So jobs that anybody in the community can have. These aren't set aside jobs. These are jobs that pay at least definitely minimum wage, ideally a living wage, because those are very different. But, you know, recognizing that like in our society right now, so much of how we're defined is by our jobs or by what we do in the community. And while we all want to know, like, recognize we're more than just work, we're more than just like where we spend our day, that is a big part of how we get purpose and belonging. So wanting to make sure everyone has access to that and in a place that they feel is meaningful to them. Hopefully this helps.
Yeah. So I love this question about US perspective versus across the world. And I can only briefly touch on it, but we will kind of get back to some of these concepts and what we do to hold ourselves accountable, I think nationally and internationally towards the end a little bit. But what I really want to sit in is when I look at systems of oppression, I root them in white supremacy and hegemonic processes, colonization, imperialism. And so frankly, these types of oppression, I think, are across the world because most of the world has been colonized. So it might look a little bit different based on what country you're in or how other communities have intertwined with colonization and white supremacy, and so I think for us, we'll be talking a little bit more about social justice and racism with some of the things that we're doing that we'll show examples of moving forward. But I think you can apply these different types of oppression to examples internationally. I can also give you an example of what other communities are doing to hold themselves accountable to cultural pieces. I know a big critique of New Zealand is that it's just an island. They don't have as many people to work with, so it's easier to adapt things. I think that's a bit of a cop-out response because you are marrying this colonized British identity with the Maori identity, but they are phenomenal at restorative justice and youth justice. They have married the Maori identity of food, of conflict, working through it as a community thing to work through with the youth. So if a youth has vandalized a building, everyone who feels that they were impacted by the event is able to show up. Food is there, and then the community is able to offer support of what they think would help the youth, but also the business owners are able to give their opinion. And then at the end of that, the family is able to talk about what might be best for them. So there are layers to it, but then also at the end, they get to break bread together. So again, it's how do we bring in some of the oppressed groups to bring through and break down the cultural barriers of colonization and just a punitive system in that regard. So that is separate from us as a nonprofit, but I want to share that as a way that other people and other communities are trying to hold themselves accountable to upending this. But I would argue that things like racism, things like sexism, are all based in colonialism. They just kind of look different. So I often hear, well, it doesn't exist in this area or that area. It does, it just doesn't look like the way that we define it in the US. And I think this is also my plug for when you're looking to upend these systems of oppression, you really need to root yourself in Black history, because that is the foundation of colonialism, is that the Black identity is at the bottom, and that frankly, that white identity, that Western European identity is at the top, and what's in between. So I know for myself in trying to look at systems of oppression, I'm looking at the history, I'm looking at how slavery, the different trajectories to where people got, looking at South America and how they've worked through it, or working with it. So this is just my plug. If you want to know more about these things and understand these systems better and how they're working and how to upend them, understand Black history. And then from there, understand the different types of history of different groups and how they've been oppressed. And I think you'll see it all start to come together in that regard. We have at the end some books that we recommend. Some of that's in there, but also feel free to reach out if you want some further ideas on that. But that's kind of how I'd answer that question right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Laura, feel free to pop in if there are more questions that come up. It is hard for us to see as we're talking.
Yeah.
I think the only other things I wanted to mention, I just wanted to lift up the idea of celebration, because I think sometimes in at least in the nonprofit worlds that I'm part of, it can be like a pretty grim experience. I mean, people are struggling, but there are a lot of challenges, there are lots to overcome, and there's also a lot of strengths. And I think sometimes, just focusing on the strengths and focusing on like what people can offer, both like staff members, employees, the people you're supporting, can also be a way to kind of work against these systems that want to, tell us that like, you can't make change, you can't do these things, or you don't have these skill sets. So we do try to celebrate and find joy in our work, as much as possible, kind of bring love into the space, recognizing that change is possible. And also balancing, a lot of this is balancing with capacity. Like we have to think about sustainability. We have to think about what we can take on as humans, and we have to prioritize. And one way to do that is really to focus on mission alignment. So making sure that like we know our lane, we know that there are others in the communities doing things, and we can partner so that we can kind of work away from this scarcity mindset, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later. But a lot of work can be done in when we're open to do it in community with others.
I think also mentioning it here and further down, we really try to push past this. There's this logic in, I think, the nonprofit world and just community in general of we don't have time. We do have time. It's about prioritizing that and how do we make sure that it's all there. So the goal of Chrysalis is to work with community members through mental health, mental illnesses, and recovery. But that does not mean we don't talk about prison reform, that we don't talk about environmental justice. We do talk about those things, and whether it's from us individually, it is from us individually, and it is also from us as a community. So bringing in blog posts to talk about Juneteenth and what that means. I'm getting ahead a little bit, but it's important to say that here too, that if it's important to you, you make time for it. And sometimes we say, I'm not at capacity right now, but you are. How can I support you in that? Or that's something that you love. Can you bring that in to help us continue pushing that agenda? And I think this is again where I remind everyone, it's personal and it's not personal, bringing each other into these conversations and holding each other accountable, because we're all trying to do this work together too. So. Are we going to work? 3. Okay, perfect. So the next slide, we're going to talk about complex oppression, which, just as a reminder, is power and privilege are relative because individuals hold multiple complex and intersectional social group memberships that give relative privilege and disadvantage in different ways, depending on the different contexts.
Yeah, and on the screen, you'll see our change team timeline. So this, the change team started at Chrysalis actually through learning that we did alongside the YWCA here in Madison with the creating equitable organizations. And, you know, through that training, we created this internal committee that was made up of staff, leadership, direct service staff, people that we serve, to think about, you know, how we can continue to push our organization forward and making sure that we're meeting needs in an accessible way. So again, this really does speak to accountability, but it also speaks to the intersectional voices that we hear, and really, you know, making sure that we're not just like listening to listen, that there are actually changes that are coming from the people who have so much to say and so much value to add to the conversations in the organizations. I'm not going to read the whole change team timeline, but what you see here is just, again, the change team started in 2017, and there was a lot of planning that kind of came from that space. 2018, we really started to kind of create some structure. We made a book club and trainings that people went to. 2019, a lot more focus on partnerships, and you know, we did some presentations in Milwaukee with the mental health task force, reviewed our policies. Again, it's kind of that action, looking outward, but also looking inward, how we can continue to look at our policies and making sure that they really do need to be there, questioning whether they're kind of just arbitrary and how inclusive they really are. In 2020, you know, a lot was happening with COVID and racial justice movement, and making sure that we were considering how that affected the work, the staff that we have, the people that we support. I mean, making sure that we're not just kind of glossing over things, that when real things happen in the community, we're holding space for that. And I know Megan has a lot of experience with restorative justice, but in this time, we as staff, as our human resources, got trained in circle practices so that we can hold space for many voices in an intentional way. And while it's not for everyone and takes a lot of vulnerability, I think that has really pushed us forward as an organization. And we do still try to have different ways that we can hear voices. So while circles, some people love them, some don't, we try to have surveys so that there's another space for voice, or just spaces people can go and feel comfortable in. And then recently we've started to look at ways that the services we provide actually rely on so many things, like Megan also said, like the climate change and the justice movement and transportation. You see a picture of a bus here because this past year we've really been looking at like transportation as a social justice issue and access to modes of transportation to get you where you want to go, and how that connects to isolation or connection, and what we can do as a community to support more accessibility for people. I think anything else you want to add to this one?
I think the two pieces that I think about are one in the shared collective vision. I think that's not just the collective vision of Chrysalis, but also the community. So just thinking about Dane County proper, yes, grants might have us competitive with other nonprofits, but one example I think about is Chrysalis is looking at getting vans. I know of another nonprofit that has already had vans, and what does that look like? So putting those two people together to have those conversations, again, that we always have that kind of scarcity mindset because that's how capitalism works, right? So again, there's no harm in reaching out and be like, hey, can we talk about this? How do you do this? So we don't reinvent the wheel. Like in a lot of ways, we don't have time to do that. We have a lot of other pieces where we could be spending our energy in that regard. And I think another piece, just as an idea piece for us that I know has kept coming back into the circle, is youth support with mental health and mental illness and recovery. And we are very active about employment support. So how can Chrysalis expand, or should it expand right now? Or how do we get other people involved to potentially move that forward? Because again, that's a missing piece that we have, not that we don't care about it, but again, our mission, our goals, and then how do we expand them and bring more people in that regard?
Yeah, and before we switch slides, I just want to again highlight the last piece too about partnerships, because I think those are so important to work against the scarcity mindset, to make sure we're staying in our lane and making sure needs get met. And those take time, those take funding. So just putting plugs in for, if you're working in an agency with different funding, to prioritize that and to make sure that there's space for it. And it's not an afterthought, like, oh, let's bring this partner in. It's like, no, that takes a lot of work to build those relationships, and we need to leave space for that.
So there is a participant that has a question about what have been the biggest challenges, and specifically with setbacks, and how do we readjust? And that I think works with that slide and what we're about to talk to. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah.
If you want to think about it, I'll talk about being slow for me. Sorry, y'all. There we go. So internalization, as a reminder, is oppression that also resides within the human psyche, where oppressive beliefs are internalized. So I'd mentioned earlier that piece of what was I raised in, and so what feels innate, but what is actually learned. And so here are our favorite words: transparency, accountability, shared responsibility. Again, bringing each other into the conversations and understanding we all have beautiful, diverse experiences, and how does that impact how we communicate, what our beliefs are, how we feel about when we're brought into conversations, and just again, being willing to be vulnerable, I think is kind of the key to working through internalized oppression. And if you're on a board, or if you're part of an organization that is solely in a scarcity mindset, or a hierarchical one, it is so hard to move through that. So again, thinking about how we're going to change our policies, understanding that it's not personal, that our beliefs, they are attached to us to an extent, but that doesn't mean that's who we are, or that we're not trying to work through it. It's just, there is so much ick that is ingrained with us. So giving room for just compassion is super important in this realm, on all the levels. So
yeah, I think you kind of like led up to what I would say would be more of what a lot of the biggest challenges, because I think it is. I mean, I think culturally, where a lot of people here are coming from, like in the Midwest, I think just our perfectionist society that's like under this white supremacy umbrella, like when you disagree with someone, or when there's conflict, it can be so uncomfortable. And like you're saying, so many of these things like be uncomfortable, recognizing like, ooh, like this is actually causing this kind of harm, or like this has been really exclusive, like, ooh, who is at the table? Like, oh wow, I'm noticing who's not at the table. So I think that's been some of the most important work, and the hardest work that we've done is like really focusing on that vulnerability. And kind of the ability to like slow down, like again, there's that perfectionist like mentality where it's like, or we need to be productive, we need to like solve this issue now. And I get it, like I am a list checker off, or I like to get things done. And sometimes like that, sometimes you just need to stop and think about like, well, how are we getting these things done? So it's a big culture change. And I think whenever you're talking about like changing culture or like change, like kind of working on something that's core to who you are, like that's really hard work. So I think that, I don't know if that speaks to some of the biggest challenges, because I think that kind of can go, that can be like organizationally, but it's also individually. And I think again, sometimes when you're working in a nonprofit, especially when there's issues around funding or the intensity of the work, you know, you talk about burnout, you talk about turnover, and that's so hard. And I know that it's real in a lot of places we work, and it's real here at Chrysalis. I mean, we had a lot, you know, a hard last year, and it makes me feel like we need to put even more effort into creating a safe and like a supportive space, because I really think so much of it comes to relationships and trust. And like when you have that tenure and ability to connect with people over time, that's where you can see more change around culture or policies, because you know that you have a community of people who are going to be able to like sit with you in the ick, or let you show up with your whole self, or kind of call you out when you're like, oof, is that really what direction we want to go in right now? So I think that's been helpful. I want to just like bring or name the document that's up here now. So this actually goes back to our strategic plan that we looked at a few slides back. And this is just an accountability, again, that word, tool that we use on a quarterly basis to make sure that the actions we do as an organization are actually addressing what we set out to do in our plan. So you'll see our 4 pillars again: the programming, organizational, community building, advocacy, equity, inclusion, diversity, stigma busting. And then you'll see, you know, training and learning. You'll see funding, visibility, partnerships, board of directors, our workplace wellness initiatives. We really want to make sure that what we're doing kind of connects on multiple levels, because then I think our impact will also be a lot stronger too.
Yeah. Really. So restrictiveness is the reminder that oppression represents structural and material limitations that significantly shape individual opportunities in one sense of possibility. So again, I think you can also see in these different types of oppression, they do overlap in so many ways, but I do think it's important to break them down sometimes so that we can individually pick on them and take and not get lost in some of the other pieces.
Yeah, and this tool is helpful because I think when we're talking about trying to collaborate and make collective decisions, you do need structures for that. I think this came out of a lot of like personally me feeling as an executive director that I was making a lot of decisions and I didn't necessarily feel like there were enough voices around, or kind of that collective understanding of like decisions or input. I mean, so many, when you have different people around the table, you're able to have such a stronger outcome because it's not just one person and their one lane and one lens. So this document, it's called a strategy screen. And this has been helpful when we do want to question a new initiative or a new policy or new practice at the organization. And we created questions within each of these categories that we felt were important to have conversations around. And you'll see there's a scoring criteria too. So as we go through a different activity, you know, we ask ourselves these questions around mission. We ask the questions about staff capacity, about funding, around equity, inclusion, diversity, which we do weight double so that we can make sure that that's centered in the work, and then advocacy, visibility. And we can give it a score, which is helpful for some people. Personally, I feel like the conversation is the most helpful. And to me, this is a pause. This is a, no, we don't have to say yes or no. We can say, all right, let's do our strategy screen. Let's have a conversation and let's kind of like break that cycle of just like falling into what's next.
Yeah, I am. Again, working within the system that says we have to be making progress all the time too. I think that there's a big piece of that for me in this, and what Chrysalis does is what can we do next, but also again, remember to celebrate what's working in that regard.
Yeah, and I was going to give just one example recently of when we use this tool, because it's not always like you don't feel great sometimes after you do it and realize you can't do something, or you can or should. But we recently looked at this tool and we were talking about doing more training around motivational interviewing, which is for those, probably a lot of people on this call, or something you're familiar with, but it's a great tool to engage people and really make sure that like their voice is active in the change process. So we're excited about this opportunity to do a new learning. But when we got to the place of staff capacity, it was very clear that like we had recently had a lot of turnover, and our leadership and staff like needed some time to settle in that. And while it wasn't that we didn't value this opportunity, we just recognized like this isn't the right time. So a lot of times this is saying no, which is just, again, kind of sitting with that ability of like, I think you just said it, like kind of not doing something is still progress. You know, there's a space for that too.
Yep. So this, go ahead, Laura. Yep.
I got a couple questions here that is a chance to engage. One about the role of state authorities in reducing social oppression and positive changes in the oppression system. So like, your funders and the state, would love to hear. Someone's asked that question. It seems like a great one to get answer to. And then on the practical level, an organization that's moving to a new region in Wisconsin and experiencing challenges with a culture of scarcity among the providers. Do you have experience with talking with other providers who respond from scarcity mindset? How can you ease the tension and build the possibility of collaboration? So those are like very, those are
great questions. Yeah. Those are awesome questions.
Two ends of the spectrum, but I'm going to ask you to answer those if you've got a chance.
And so just thinking about briefly, and I know Daniel will have more to say on this, but the first question talking about the state of, the role of state authorities. One of the things we had talked about from a board standpoint recently was, how do you pay your peer support specialists an hourly rate where they could make more if they worked for the county or the state with the same job? So what are we stuck within, both from what we can provide as opposed to, and it could be we're an organization a lot of people believe in, but we can't necessarily compete with that hourly rate that the county or the state are providing. So even their authorities in a very different way than I think it's being asked is just something I think about that we're up against in that regard.
Yeah. And I think about like the tenure in the field and the ability to like know people in different spaces. Cause I've actually been pretty impressed with some of the relationships I've been able to have with like government folks in different government spaces. Like, again, it goes like, what are the barriers that really exist? And what are the ones that are just kind of there and really trying to get answers? So I think it's a lot of like relationship building with people in those positions of power, and then really asking those tough questions of like, does this barrier need to be here, or why is it here? And if it is here and it doesn't need to be here, how can we be involved with breaking that down? Because I think like we as providers in the community and like who are able to like really connect with the people who are most impacted by whatever services we're providing, we have a lot of information. We know a lot about how these barriers are actually making things so much harder for people. So I think people in different positions like really do care. And if we can come with information about, how this is actually so, a hindrance, and how much better it could be if we looked at things this way or that way. I've been, impressed with things that do change. And I will say it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of frustration, and having people in your circle that you can kind of sometimes vent with and realize like there are frustrations and those are real, and it's okay to be like needing to take a step back or knowing where you are in that engagement process.
Yeah. Did you want to at all elaborate on the scarcity, working with providers who have that scarcity mindset?
Yeah, I think that's really real. And I think that's so embedded in kind of the culture. And I think for me, the scarcity mindset also connects in some ways to this idea of like, if I'm not stressed, I'm not working hard enough. Like, I don't know, I moved here from DC and I felt that like so hard. And even moving here, like, I feel like there's this idea. It's like, if I'm not always moving, nothing's happening. And sometimes it's actually what we've talked about, like the pause or the reflection where things happen. So it would be interesting. And I don't know, like, all the different players in that conversation, but just like talk about where that's coming from, like what that's rooted in for different people. Like, we've had some interesting conversations around pay equity and how we all connect to like money in general. And like, I think just like being in, when you can be in like, spaces like that are kind of out of the norm in work settings of like, oh, how is like how I brought up connected to my current scarcity mindset? You can maybe like step back from like the strong feeling you have over that ideal and like separate it a bit and like imagine what something different would look like.
And I also see no harm in naming it.
Yeah.
Again, it's the conflict resolver a mindset. And I think also it's the East Coaster in me that's just like, let's just name it and hash it out. And that doesn't mean it has to be violent. It doesn't have to be aggressive, but I think, even naming it from your standpoint, being like, I understand that it might feel like I'm taking resources away, or this organization might get in the way, but how do we make sure that we work together and things like that? I think that's just as important, just so that there could be room for that conversation. Because I especially feel like in the Midwest, people are kind of afraid of direct conversation. That's probably been one of the bigger adjustments I've had to make since moving here, because I've always kind of seen directness as honesty and just seeing the bottom line right away. Not everyone feels that way, and that's fair and reasonable. But I think understanding that you might have to try multiple ways to say it and allow space for it multiple times for people to be able to come in and talk about it, and share their ideas, but also evolve with it too, because I might have an opinion right away on something, but that doesn't mean it's not going to change or can't change as we move forward, as I learn more information. So again, it's the compassion, room for compassion and vulnerability, and like, I would need to name this so we can make this happen, and also to give us all, to remind us that we all grow in this type of work.
And yeah, I think that's totally spot on. And one other like something to think about is like, when you're feeling that scarcity mindset, like maybe questioning like what it is you're trying to provide and what the need is, or like, is the need still there? I think sometimes, like, especially being with an organization who's been around for 40 years, and like, I mean, I haven't been here for 40 years, but Chrysalis has, and things change and the needs of the community change. So like, question, like, am I feeling this scarcity mindset because there's like a need for this, or do I need to change? Like, do we need to change what we're offering because maybe the needs evolved in something else too?
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. So,
Laura's
I've got one question that's on the slide. Sorry, I don't know if you're leaving this slide yet, but
no, we're staying on this slide for right now. So,
okay, good. Just maybe there's an interest in links to more info available on the items listed on the slide. And so that's the thing that's relevant to this slide. And there's one about, there's another one to check as you go forward.
Okay, perfect.
We can talk about the accountability piece.
Yep.
So first, the section on the left, the social and racial justice in action, that's actually taken from our website. So if you go to workwithchrysalis.org, and we can put it in the chat, or maybe Laura can help us with that. But that is a page that we have up on our website at the Chrysalis website to make sure that we are staying accountable. And there's the transparency and all the words we've been saying. To make sure our community knows what we're up to and what we're doing to kind of stay true to our equity statement, which I can read as well. But just recognizing like these things, again, will take time. So this is going to be building. This is kind of something relatively new for us. I think it's important for our funders to see this, and the staff that we work with, the participants, to know that this is a big value of ours. And while Chrysalis in general, like the mission is around mental health, substance use recovery. Like Megan was saying, it's so intersectional, and we don't look at people as, you are mental health, you are substance use, you are a whole person. You come from everyone comes from different walks of life, and we need to make sure that what we're kind of addressing as a community really is taking that into account, all the different identities people hold and the staff that we work with hold, because I think, again, when we talk about tenure and workplace wellness, like making sure that the staff that we support are able to feel like they can be their whole selves, and that they are in a community that support what's important to them too. And I can read the equity statement and then get the question. So Chrysalis is dedicated to providing inclusionary practices that promote systemic and personal transformation within our organization and among those we serve and the larger community. Chrysalis acknowledges that the people we serve experience systemic barriers when it comes to income, education, mental health treatment, unemployment, and incarceration. All these barriers are a result of and continue to inequity, unearned privilege, and unequal access to opportunities in our community. Chrysalis recognizes that such systems are white-centered, patriarchal, heteronormative, and that we all have individual biases that are informed by these systems. I think that kind of speaks to like what you were saying about naming those things. So it's
Right.
not just like floating out there.
Yeah, and I think it's just, I think trying to be open to new ideas can be exhausting at times. And so recognizing the fatigue of like, I need to be aware of it all. No, and, you know, allow yourself to bring other people into your organization that can hold you accountable or help hold the organization accountable for these things, because it is exhausting to constantly be like, I am fighting against the system. And the system is exhausting to fight against. And it's okay to say I'm tired right now, or no, I don't have space for this. So that's where I think the equity statement is also really important for Chrysalis in that regard of, again, naming it, but also understanding that each of us are impacted by it slightly differently, but we are all being impacted by it, I think is huge. To kind of continually name and talk about. And you know, sometimes if we're surprised that we didn't notice it within ourselves, it's because that's how oppression works. We're not supposed to know it. We're not supposed to see it or be able to name it. So I think that's another big piece to this.
Was there a question or do we want to?
I think we're
Okay.
Yeah. There we go. So this slide was really funny for us to talk about and try to decide and pick on, because we're constantly trying to bring in new resources for each other and share and be like, I just learned this idea. What do you think? Or, you know, what are the common ones? What are ones we're not even thinking about reading, you know? So this is something, by no means is this a limit. This is just some things that have stood out to us recently, both from a national level, but then also from our own community. So just going over the books that we mentioned here is The Body is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love, written by Sonia Renee Taylor. We have Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, The Color of Hope, People of Color, Mental Health Narratives by Vanessa Hazard and Irisha Picot. The Protest Psychosis by Jonathan Metzl. That is about how schizophrenia became criminalized within the Black community. Very eye-opening on both how mental institutions thrived and also what changed them, but also understanding the intersectionality of race and mental illnesses. And then As Long as Grass Grows, which is the Indigenous Fight for Environmental Justice from Colonization to Standing Rock by Dina Julio Whitaker. Phenomenal book, just talking about history and how do we work through it and it not repeating, and how do we reclaim pieces, because as we've said throughout this, it all intersects with each other. That, you know, if you are going to be a mental health advocate, racial justice and environmental justice are just as important pieces, and also impact all of the layers and moving within and without each other, throughout each other, because we are dynamic human beings.
Yeah, and I also wanted just to like name some of the partners. I know I mentioned the YWCA, who is really integral to like our formation of our change team. We also participate in their Racial Justice Summit every year, and it's a great resource. And now it's virtual, so a lot of people all around the country and beyond can participate. I'm also want to bring up EDO, Each One Teach One. We've worked with Tara Wilhelmy for a few years now, and it's been great to partner with Tara, who is like specifically supporting BIPOC community in leading peer specialist services and doing a lot in the community. And then we've partnered with Extension Dane County for strategic planning. So just highlighting that, you know, again, we don't want to do these things in silos, and there are so many amazing people doing things. Like if you just kind of open your eyes and reach out and say, hey, you want to have coffee? And I think I connected with Tara because I saw a project she was doing. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like maybe she'll meet up with me. And then 3 years later, we're now like 2 grants in and doing some really cool stuff together. And then I just wanted to drop this quote. I think this comes up in a lot of spaces, like conferences I've been at, this little Watson, if you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And I think it's really important, especially as social workers who are in this quote unquote helping profession, to remind ourselves why we're actually here and how we really need to like work together and see ourselves in these struggles. Like, even if it's not something we're directly connected to, we need to connect ourselves with people who are and recognize how collaboration is so important.
Yeah. And quickly before I forget, there was a question on the thoughts on limits of savings for individuals with disabilities for Medicaid or SNAP, and to be able to keep Medicaid and PCAs.
Yes, that's a great example of systems that, you know, are extremely frustrating to work within. And there have been, you know, different limitations or some easing of those limitations within this COVID world that, you know, potentially will not be existing much longer. And those are real. And again, like that, I think is a great example of like, how can we continue to inform people and educate people? We work with a lot locally in Dane County with an organization called Employment Resources Incorporated, because benefits are really confusing and we don't claim to be experts in everything. We say we are not experts in everything. And so we need to find people who are. So who out there knows more than we do and who can partner with to learn ways that we can support people the best we can within systems, while also working to continue to break down those barriers and see how we can change those systems too.
Yeah. So we're on our last slide. We are going to have a bit of a shameless plug in a second. But Dani and I spent some time trying to figure out how we could be accessible, and just again, it's important for us to be able to share our experiences, but also share resources in that regard. So please feel free to reach out to us. Dani's email, I think I've always said your last name wrong. So let's go. Yeah, well, thank you. But go ahead. I don't want to butcher it.
Rischall. Rischall at workwithchrysalis.org.
And then mine is just megan.malone@wisc.edu. Email is probably the easiest way to get a hold of us in that regard.
And then, like Megan said, we have a plug up here for an event that we're hosting at Chrysalis. It'll be primarily in person, but we'll also be live streaming it. And this event actually came from a lot of the systems change and work that we've been doing around strategic planning and trying to center more stories. And specifically, you know, we're trying to center stories around hope, but also realizing like there's a lot within hope that's not always pretty and tied up in a bow. So we're hosting our first storytelling event on March 7th at 5:30, and this is actually part of a larger online day of giving. So if you're local and want to swing by Chrysalis, you're welcome to come, or if you want to join via our live stream on Facebook, you're also welcome to do that.
Yep. So that is kind of it for us. Obviously, we'll stay on if there's more questions. Laura, we'll give it back to you.
Well, obviously there's so much rich experience here, and this is a chance for any participants out there. This is your chance to ask, tips for where your organization is right now, or ideas for how to create new partnerships. I think this has been so rich on how organizations change and how much of that work happens in traditional organizational ways, or ones that we sort of teach, but also in these deep internal ways. And so I just want to kind of really appreciate the breadth of the materials that you've brought. And since we'll wait for questions, but I'm going to just ask you both, like maybe for an example of the of where you really felt like that was a change for this organization when you saw something, like what kind of crystallizes when you see the change happening. Do you have a sense of that or a story about that?
Yeah, your turn with that. I don't know. I feel like I've shared a lot with that, but I can also add on too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like one thing we mentioned with our, board decision-making process about how new board members are onboarding, and just like you feeling the discomfort when you're kind of questioning something. This was just last night, like I said, so it's very fresh for me, this conversation, but just like being able to sit with that and feeling like people were heard, having some time to process afterwards, getting a bunch of emails late last night and this morning about it. Like
Mhm.
people care, and while it was uncomfortable, it felt like people were at least respected in that, and like knowing that we're going to be able to move forward even though it's uncomfortable. Like that to me is a huge win versus like, okay, well, I guess like, no, everyone's gonna leave the board and like what's gonna happen to Chrysalis, just feeling kind of grounded that like it's gonna be okay. And like even though it's gonna, like, we're kind of in the ick, like we're kind of in this messy, but you can feel like the mud and you're sludging through, but it's like that's kind of how change happens.
And
you
it's,
know?
and I think also that it's not a judgment on each of us that there is ick.
Yeah.
Again, I think that especially in organizations and in leadership, supervisors are afraid to be challenged or don't want to, hold people accountable. But it's like people need to feel safe and feel trusted. And so if you cannot sit in the ick of it, you're not like, that's just the organization isn't going to survive in a healthy manner in that regard. But also that we know that the discomfort will get us in a good spot. And we also, I know for me, I still love my board members just as much, even though there is ick. I mean, I love that there is ick because it means that we are not going to be stagnant either, I think. And I think that's super important in that regard.
Thank you. We've gotten one comment and one question, a question about accessible transportation, and whether there are groups you are connecting with around this issue, or if that person should reach out directly. But I love the idea of like just a little bit of more on the transportation justice issues you're thinking about. And then also this, just someone kind of offering a comment that the doing the getting to know the board members, is such a good idea, and how that helps tie people into the organization, and maybe talking a little bit more about that, or even how like maybe that's part of what gives you the relationships that makes the ick feel dynamic rather than destructive, right? So both of those are for you right now.
You want to start with the transportation piece?
Yes, I will comment to Melissa, because Melissa, you can reach out anytime, but also anyone can. So that work specifically is done with our change team. So I will say, I am not necessarily the one who's leading that, but I think our change team is really interested in like partnering more with the community. So I would say if you connect with me, I can connect you with the chair of our change team. I know we've done listening sessions with the folks at the Metro Transit, and they're actually going to be coming to do some information sharing. So reach out and I can connect you like directly with the chair of our change team who's doing that work.
And I can just speak briefly about the getting to know the board piece. That idea directly came out of, I am in my final year as a social work master's student. I am working at a local hospital in an adult inpatient psych unit. And I was just looking at who the people were. And I noticed that there are like 50 board members, and a couple of them have their pronouns. There's only 3 pictures of them, and there are no emails. And I'm just like, you are making decisions about people who are getting paid hourly up to getting paid 6 figures times $1 million, right? And it's just like, you're making very powerful decisions and I have no access to you. That is very uncomfortable. I've also worked with other boards in previous parts of my life, and it's just like, why are we on the board if we're not going to be visible? If that, to me, that in a lot of ways just actually feels more like a power play, and it's very uncomfortable because, again, if the mission of Chrysalis is to dismantle that and also prioritize experience along with education, then we can't just sit behind our vote. I think it's important that we're showing up to events, and I think I came on right as y'all started pushing that too. So I think there's that piece too, that it kind of, the timing just worked out right. And then frankly, Laura's class of like advocacy, find a project. And I was like, oh no. But advocacy for Chrysalis is what this looked like. It doesn't have to, because we had even talked about going and doing some public policy work and stuff like that. And it's like, this was advocacy for me in a different way. I also don't mind putting myself out there, and I want to recognize that that's not true for everyone. So there are people on my board that are like, I don't want to write anything, but I was like, I could interview you. Or again, the photos, like, let's just share who we are in whatever capacity we want to, so we can show up authentically, excuse me. So again, I think it's a simple change, but it also we just, again, transparency and compassion in that, and lived experience, I think, is a big piece of that.
You'll see that you've got someone from the Homeless Services Consortium talking about the need, just affirming or appreciating the theme about need to rest and to say no and to celebrate. And so I just wanted you to hear the appreciation for that here.
I mean, I will just quickly say, I think my biggest piece of advice, especially for those in marginalized communities, learning how to say no is probably the most powerful thing that you can do, because it is upsetting to white supremacy and capitalism that you can say no and you want to stay behind your no.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to throw that out there, that no is so important for you to be able to be comfortable with, as much as yes, but more importantly, we're supposed to be yes people. So being a no person is okay too, and is super important. So
yeah, I love that, like, when things that are actually like healthy also support the mission of the work you're doing, because I think, like, you know, taking a mental health day or being open about like how you really are coming into this meeting, and like, you know, it was a crappy morning and you're going to try to bring your whole self, but you can't. But like, being human is working against systems of oppression. So thank you, Tori, for that, naming that. And I do also just want to take a few moments like to express gratitude, because I think that's also something that like can kind of work is important in these systems, because I just want to name, you know, how has it been a year? Not even a year,
Yeah.
just a year.
Just a year, I think.
That Megan's been on the board, and there's such a big impact that Megan has made already. And just even throwing out like, let's do this presentation. I would not have been like, okay, like Megan is here to support me, you know, Laura having our relationship, like the way with the UW and all the great questions and just showing up. Like I'm just really feeling a lot of gratitude for this space, and like being able to have this conversation and realizing, you know, as nonprofits, like you can still make a change, like when you are working in these really frustrating systems, and you want to find people who can make you feel like, okay, like let's keep going, and it's worthwhile to do that. Thank you.
I think, well, I want to just close out with the same gratitude, really, for the work that you're doing in this community, always the work that you're doing to change the way you work in this community, and the approach, you know, the kind of context and attention to white supremacy and decolonizing as you do that work. It's really exciting to hear. Really big gift to all of us who got to be with you today and share this space and learn from you. You got some thanks in the Q&A, and I know that many people are going away with that gratitude. Just feel that big bomb of gratitude everywhere. And then, so thank you for everyone in attendance. Just a few closeout things. Thanks for being part of this event. And you'll find the recording will go up very soon onto the conference website. You'll be able to find the recording and the slides there very soon, maybe not today, but early next week, if not today. And the CU email will come separate to you. You can see in the Q&A the link for evaluation. Remember that in a half an hour at 2 p.m. Imani Barbarin and Bethany Matson will, Bethany Matson will introduce Imani Barbarin, the creator of and force behind Crutches and Spice, to close out our conference. I think you don't want to miss that. And that's going to be on YouTube at 2. So please come to that and go have a break and carry some of this gratitude with you. Thank you so much, Dani and Megan.
Thank you for everyone who showed up. We really appreciate it.